But Matt, I'm going to toss it to you to start. The biggest news probably overall was Jeff Ulbrich at a recent press conference and was discussing his defensive line rotation and mentioned that his players, ideally, in his words, would be playing 30 to 35 snaps a game, including the stars, just as much as maybe some reserve players. And obviously, some fans felt some feelings about that, not some good feelings, because they were concerned that their best players wouldn't be getting enough playing time. And that statistically doesn't match up with the rest of the league. So, Matt, what was your reaction to that?
I keyed in on the important part of all that, which was ideally. And ideally, we have the talent along the defensive line that matches up with each other. The drop off in production wouldn't be so steep from the starters to the next tier. And also, ideally, they all stay healthy throughout the year. A lot of ideals there, and the ideals are rarely reality. I believe, ideally, we would wanted to do this last year as well. But we're not able to do that because people were injured. And we didn't have that consistent depth all the way through the depth chart. So ideally, yes, but we can't rely on ideals, and they're not going to rely on ideals either. They're going to have contingencies in place just like they did last year. So let's see. I was looking at a few games for Quinnen Williams, and he probably averaged near 40 snaps per game, probably putting him at around like 58%, around 60% of snaps throughout the year. That's still kind of low considering, but at the same time, it's more than that 30, 35. And I think the same could be said for the edges last year between Franklin Myers and Huff as well. They were all around 40 snaps as well. This year, we have a lot more depth on the edge. So maybe we can see if the ideals hold up for the edge. But I just don't see it happening for the inside. Right now, I see only one starting quality defensive tackle, and that's Quinnen Williams. After him, there's not a lot. Sure, we can move Franklin Myers inside and taking a good amount of third down snaps. But other than that, I don't see much there. I see a lot of backups, a lot of mediocrity. So there would be a considerable drop off between Quinnen Williams' play and everybody else. So to really give Quinnen 30 snaps, 35 snaps in that group, I think would be a horrible mistake and most likely won't end up happening anyways.
Yeah, I completely and totally agree. I think you nailed it right off the top. Ideally, they have the talent to be able to rotate like that and not have a drop off. That's just not possible in today's NFL. I would love for that to be the case. If they can tutor some of these guys that they've brought in on the edges and some of these guys that are coming back from injuries or time off, like Solomon Thomas or Carl Lawson or Vinny Curry, and they can take some of these young guys that they've brought in, like Jermaine Johnson and Bryce Huff, and really kind of turn them in to the freaks that we think they're capable of, and everybody hits, that's a great problem to have. It's just not very likely. And the other part about it is Jeff Ulbrich said it himself. He said, ideally, this is how we want things to go. Well, I wanted to look at it and see if that holds weight. So I went to the last time we could probably make reasonable assumptions that Jeff Ulbrich would be making the calls. And I do think that Robert Saleh has a hand in this too, and that it's not just Ulbrich. So I don't want to just point anything at him, but I'm really not trying to. So I looked at his time when he was the interim defensive coordinator for the Falcons in 2020. Which is his only time in the league being an actual defensive coordinator. And you look at the two best players on that defensive line that year, and it was Dante Fowler and Grady Jarrett. And there's multiple instances for both of them where they're playing above 50% of snaps of game, 50% of the snaps in a game, as high as even in the 80s, where Dante Fowler is playing up to 83% at the highest. He has games towards the end of the season of 75, 76, 66, 65. And you go over to Grady Jarrett, and Grady Jarrett was playing even more as the far and away best player on their defensive line. It wasn't even close. He played 31% of snaps at the end of the year. I think he was dealing with an injury. The lowest outside of that was 53%, and the lowest outside of that was 77%. Every other game was at least 77, if not close to 80 or close to 90. So their best players played. The guys that were barring away the best guys on their team, the best guys on their line that they would be significantly worse without, they weren't taking them out to follow some arbitrary rule where ideally we want to do this for 30 to 35 snaps. And Quinnen Williams has been dominating this left guard all game, but we're going to take him out because he needs to be on a pitch count. That's not how this is going to work. This is a sentence that I think was taken out of context a little bit. I think the number was a little shocking to people because they were expecting to see their stars play as much as possible. But this system relies on guys being healthy all game. So they are going to rotate a little bit. And I don't think, since they have the depth that they do, and hopefully they have guys hitting the way that they do, you're not going to see anyone playing 85 to 90 to, maybe even 75% of snaps consistently. But your best of the best are going to be playing 65 to 70 every week. And I really think that it's going to be the key times when they need a breather that you have the reserve guys to come in to play those 30 to 35% of snaps. And in my opinion, the percentage matters so much more than the actual number, because games, the snap count, it varies. It's never equal. Roughly, you would think between 70 and 80 plays in a game. But if you have a guy that's playing 35 snaps, but it was a run heavy game and there was only 62 plays, well, that's more than 50%. Would you like to see that be a little higher? Sure. But that sounds a lot better than 30 to 35 snaps. I'm not too concerned about this because I think the guys that are going to be playing are going to show up early and often in training camp and also on the field. And it's going to be better overall for the team and better overall for the defensive line and the defense as a whole, because a guy that's fresh in the fourth quarter is going to be a lot better than a star that's gassed out anyway. And the stars are still going to get enough reps to make it count.
So here's two talking points that I've just kind of thought of. I think the most important thing is when these starters are actually playing. So yeah, we're expecting rotation throughout the game. But how about when the game is on the line or going into a half and you need a stop? Who's in the game at that point? Are they still going to be rotating in and out during these pressure situations? Or are they going to have their stars do star things when we need them the most?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's where you focus on one number and you just hear 30 to 35 snaps a game. Well, if those 30 to 35 snaps are the most important snaps in the game, I'd rather have those guys playing. So it really is getting overblown. And I really think once you see this actual defense play this year, it's not going to matter nearly as much. We're just going to be glad that we have the depth and the talent that we do to be able to keep guys fresh well into the end of the game where we really need them to be at their best.
Absolutely. The second talking point that I was thinking of, I also posed this question to Twitter a little while ago. If we say the ideal actually happens and these guys really flow from starter to second tier to third tier and everybody's productive, and our total team sacks are maybe top 5 or top 10, but on the other side of that, our stars maybe don't have the sack totals that you kind of look at when you think of high price tag stars in the league. Do you think that these guys deserve the money then if they're not producing at those levels?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because historically with this scheme, with this Pete Carroll cover 3, when you get a defensive line that is towards the top of the league in sack production, you usually end up with a defense that's towards the top of the league too. So if they're getting a defensive line effort from everybody, including the stars, where maybe it's not 14 sacks from Carl Lawson, but it's 8 or 9, and he's close to the top, or Quinnen Williams is giving you 8.5 or 9 sacks a year, or maybe he gets to 10 one year, or at worst he's getting 7, but he's doing it every single year and he's creating pressure and he's drawing focus and he's allowing guys like Jermaine Johnson to be free off the edge and get one-on-ones, or when they sub in Bryce Huff can get a one-on-one and have a better advantage. that's the value for it. And so I think if the Stars are still leading the team and the defense overall is following behind it because their defensive line is dominating, that's the first part of this defense working. I've talked a lot about what this defense needs to work, and it's a lot of pieces in a lot of areas. Maybe most importantly than anything, an offense that can score, that keeps opposing offenses passing the ball. But behind that, you need to get pressure and you need to get home on quarterbacks. So if their defensive line is that good, I want to keep the guys around that are making it that good.
So with this trade-off with time to rest, but also sacrificing production, do you think that the players themselves would prefer this?
I think some of them may not, but I think some of them will, because we also got to remember this improves their longevity of their careers. Is if they're not playing massive amounts of snaps every game, every season, being pushed to their very limit, they're likely not going to get hurt as often because they're not straining as much. They're not having to feel like maybe they have to play through an injury as hard as they do because they have to get the reps in because no one else behind them is going to be worthy of doing anything. I think there's going to be a give and take to it, where I think some players are really going to appreciate it because they're not going to be overworked. They're not going to be pushed to the edge. They're not going to be gassed at the end of every game and potentially shorten the overall length of their careers. And some other guys that are going to want the stats, that are going to want the recognition, that are going to want to be able to turn around and get, a payday from another team and say, I was top 5 in the league in sacks and, played this many snaps, they may not see it that way. But I really think it's going to depend on the player. I don't think it's going to be an overarching feeling one way or the other.
Yeah, look at a lot of our rookies. They're already in their almost at their mid-20s already. So
Michael Clemens is 24.
He's already 24. He's as old as Quinton Williams. So it's
literally,
yeah. So it's funny, but at the same time, yeah. These are guys that probably want to extend their career as much as they can to increase the payout at the end of the day. I could definitely see them definitely benefiting from this.
Yeah, I think so too. And like I said, I think it's going to depend player to player. I think there are going to be some guys, maybe not on this team right now, or maybe not that we know. And maybe the Jets are a focus for their team philosophically is going to be to look for guys that are going to care about the team's success more anyway. And so it won't be an issue. But I feel like overall, I think the players are going to really appreciate, especially defensive linemen, where it's such a contact heavy position where you're getting into a street fight on every play. I think they're going to appreciate that extra rest.
I think so as well.